The morning sun spilled across the city skyline, casting golden streaks on the glass towers that shimmered like giants in the distance. Among those towers was one belonging to a man no one in this story suspected, a man who commanded boardrooms, who signed billion-dollar deals, and whose name carried weight in the financial world. But today, he wasn't stepping into a boardroom. He was stepping into an ordinary neighborhood bank branch. He didn't arrive in a chauffeur-driven car or with an entourage. No cameras, no polished suits, no diamond cuff. Instead, he wore a plain polo shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed sneakers, the kind that made him blend into a crowd rather than stand out from it. He wanted it that way, because this wasn't just an errand. This was a test. That as he pushed open the heavy glass door, a bell chimed faintly. The air inside smelled faintly of printer ink and coffee that had been sitting for hours. People stood in line, some filling out slips, others glancing at their phones. No one turned their head. No one recognized him. And that was exactly how he planned it, he thought to himself. Let's see how they treat a man when they think he has nothing. His steps echoed softly against the polished floor as he approached the counter. Behind it, a teller sat typing lazily, barely glancing up. When her eyes finally flicked toward him, there was a subtle shift in a pan-on scan, the kind that speaks louder than words. Her brows knit slightly, almost as if she was already questioning why he was there. "Good morning," the CEO said politely, offering a warm smile. "Yeah, morning," the teller muttered, her tone flat. She didn't return the smile. Her eyes drifted back to her screen as if he were a distraction instead of a customer. The CEO leaned slightly closer. "I'd like to discuss opening a corporate account," he said calmly. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. This time she looked at him fully, eyes narrowing. There was disbelief in her tone when she asked, "A corporate account? For you?" The words hung heavy in the air. Customers nearby glanced over, sensing the tension. The CEO remained composed, but inside he registered the weight of that single word "you." He nodded patiently. "Yes, for me." But the teller didn't move. Instead, she pressed her lips together, her expression caught somewhere between annoyance and suspicion. She tapped her pen against the desk and said, "You'll need to talk to the branch manager for that. Wait over there." The CEO turned his head slightly toward the waiting area. A row of stiff chairs, a stack of outdated magazines, and a corner plant that had seen better days. He nodded slowly and walked over, each step deliberate. He could feel the glances following him, not out of respect, but out of judgment. He sat down, back straight, hands folded, and watched. The minutes ticked by. Staff whispered across the counter, throwing him quick glances. One even chuckled under his breath. The CEO remained silent, his patience unshaken, though his mind was taking note of every detail. Finally, after what felt longer than it should, the branch manager emerged from an office door. He adjusted his tie as he walked, his expression carrying the air of someone already convinced of what he was about to say. His eyes landed on the CEO, and his brow arched in surprise, the same scanning look from head to toe, the same silent judgment. "Sir," the manager began, his voice clipped. "What seems to be the issue?" The CEO rose slowly to his feet. His tone was polite, steady, yet commanding enough to draw the attention of everyone in the lobby. "I was hoping to open a corporate account for my company," he explained. "I came here to see how your branch could assist me." The manager's lips twitched into a thin smile, but it wasn't the smile of welcome. It was the smile of someone who had already made up his mind. The lobby grew quieter. Customers shifted in their seats. The staff leaned in closer. No one knew who this man really was. No one imagined the power hidden beneath his calm exterior. And in that moment, as the manager opened his mouth to respond, the CEO thought quietly to himself, 7 minutes. That's all it will take for their true colors to show. The stage was set. The test had begun. And in the very next moment, the mask of professionalism would slip, and the prejudice would reveal itself in full force. The branch manager stopped just a few feet away from the CEO, folding his arms as if to draw a line of separation. His tone carried no warmth, only a thin veil of formality. "So, you're looking to open a corporate account?" he asked. The words dragged out like he was entertaining a request he already planned to deny. The CEO nodded calmly. "Yes, for my company. I'd like to know the requirements and see how soon the account can be set up." For a brief moment, the room fell silent. The customers seated nearby glanced up from their phones, sensing tension beneath the politeness. The teller behind the counter tried to hide her smirk, tapping her pen nervously against a stack of forms. The manager's lips pressed into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sir, I think you might be mistaken. Corporate accounts aren't handled at this level. They require extensive documentation and significant capital. Perhaps you should try one of our partner banks, something more suitable." His words landed like a slap. The implication was clear. You don't belong here. The CEO's posture remained steady, but his eyes studied the man carefully. "I'm aware of the requirements," he replied softly. "That's why I came here." The teller couldn't help but chuckle under her breath. "You should probably try a community bank down the street," she added, loud enough for others to hear. "They might have something you can afford." A couple of customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One woman shook her head as if silently saying, "This isn't right," but no one spoke. The CEO exhaled slowly, steadying his patience. "I don't think you understand," he said, his voice still calm but firmer now. "I'm not here for a personal account. I need a corporate account for my business." The manager leaned in slightly, his smile gone. His tone hardened, dripping with condescension. "Opening a corporate account isn't something just anyone can do. These accounts handle millions of dollars. They're reserved for established companies. We need to ensure our clients can meet those expectations." The unspoken message. "You don't look like someone who could." The CEO's jaw tightened, but outwardly, he stayed composed. He had been judged before by competitors, by doubters, by those who couldn't see beyond their own prejudice. But this moment was different. Here, in front of ordinary customers, his dignity was being chipped away, piece by piece. He tried once more, giving them a chance. "I can provide whatever documentation you need," he said. "Financial statements, incorporation papers, anything. All I need is a fair conversation." But instead of responding, the teller scoffed loudly, shaking her head. "This is a waste of time. We have real clients waiting." Her words were sharp enough to cut through the air. The customers looked up again, whispering among themselves. Some frowned, others exchanged glances of disbelief. The CEO felt every eye on him, not in admiration but in doubt. The manager straightened his tie and crossed his arms. "Sir, let me be blunt. This branch cannot accommodate your request. Perhaps you should try another location." The CEO tilted his head slightly. "Are you saying you're refusing me service?" The manager hesitated for only a fraction of a second before doubling down. "That's correct. We don't believe this is the right place for your business," the teller added quickly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or maybe for any business you might have." The words echoed in the CEO's mind, not because he doubted himself, but because they revealed everything he needed to know. He glanced at the clock on the wall. Exactly 7 minutes had passed since he first walked in. He looked back at the staff. Their smug expressions unshaken, their bias no longer subtle but laid bare for everyone to see. The lobby was silent now, heavy with the weight of what had just been said. Even those who wanted to speak up stayed quiet, too afraid to challenge authority. The CEO finally nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well," he said softly. He turned slightly, his eyes sweeping across the room at the customers who looked on, at the staff who thought they had just dismissed a nobody, and at the manager who stood tall in his arrogance. Inside, the CEO's decision was already made. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to argue. Their actions had written the ending for them. As he walked back toward the counter, every step echoed louder than the last. He leaned against the desk just long enough to meet the teller's eyes. "You're certain about this?" he asked one final time. His voice was calm, almost too calm. The teller smirked. "Positive." The manager folded his arms and nodded, his confidence absolute. "Yes, sir, we are." The CEO paused, letting the silence stretch, the anticipation thick in the air. Then, with a polite smile that carried the weight of something no one else understood, he simply said, "All right." And with that single word, he turned toward the lobby door. The branch staff smirked, convinced they had put him in his place. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that the real storm was just about to begin. The room had grown too quiet. Every customer, every whisper, every shuffling footstep had faded into a tense silence. All eyes were now fixed on the man at the counter, on the stranger who dared to ask for more than the staff believed he deserved. The teller leaned forward, her voice sharp, deliberately loud enough to carry across the lobby. "Sir, you're wasting our time. We have actual clients to serve. If you can't take the hint, maybe you should leave." Her words sliced through the air like a blade. A few customers gasped quietly. One elderly man in the waiting chairs frowned, shaking his head in disapproval. But no one spoke aloud. The CEO remained still, his face composed, his hands resting calmly on the counter. But behind his steady eyes, something darker stirred in anger, tightly leashed. Simmering just beneath the surface, the manager stepped closer, puffing out his chest as though his authority needed to be displayed. "You've been told already," he said with finality. "This branch will not process your request. You need to leave immediately." The words hung heavy in the air. Customers shifted in discomfort. The humiliation wasn't just implied anymore, it was public, undeniable, and intentional. The CEO looked around the room slowly, scanning the faces of strangers who had just witnessed his rejection. Some looked down, ashamed for him. Others looked away, uncomfortable to meet his gaze. A mother pulled her child closer, as though shielding her from a scene that was unraveling into something cruel. The teller, emboldened by her manager, raised her voice even louder. "Do you not understand English?" she barked. "We said no. You don't belong here." Gasps rippled through the lobby. The cruelty in her words was naked now, stripped of any excuse of policy or procedure. The prejudice wasn't silent anymore, it had found its voice. One man in line muttered under his breath, "That's not right," but he quickly fell silent when the manager shot him a warning glare. The CEO closed his eyes for a brief second, exhaling deeply. He knew if he responded with anger, he would only confirm their bias. He knew if he raised his voice, they would twist the story against him. So, he stood still, like a mountain, weathering the storm, unshaken but silently gathering power. When he opened his eyes again, they locked onto the tellers.com, controlled, unreadable. "I understand perfectly," he said softly, but his tone, though quiet, carried something deeper, something that made the teller falter for just a second, her smirk flickering into uncertainty. The manager crossed his arms again, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. "Good. Then save us all the trouble and step aside. We have real business to attend to." The CEO turned slightly, his gaze sweeping across the room once more. He saw the pity in some eyes, the discomfort in others, and the silent judgment in many more. In that moment, he knew this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every unseen person who had ever been told they didn't belong, every unheard voice that had been dismissed without a chance. He looked back at the staff, his composure unbroken. He didn't shout, he didn't argue, he didn't plead. Instead, he let silence do the talking, because silence, in this moment, was louder than anything else. The tension in the lobby was unbearable now. Customers shifted, papers rustled, but no one dared move. Everyone knew something was building. Finally, the CEO stepped back slowly from the counter. "All right," he said simply, his voice carrying an odd calmness. The teller rolled her eyes. "Finally, maybe now we can get back to real work." But the CEO didn't leave. Not yet. He turned his head toward the wall clock again. The second hand ticked forward, marking the passage of time. He whispered just loudly enough for himself. 7 minutes. No one understood what he meant. "Not yet." As he walked toward the door, customers followed him with their eyes, some with guilt, others with silent curiosity. They had no idea who he really was. They had no idea that the man they just saw humiliated carried more power than the entire branch combined. And while the staff smirked, believing they had rid themselves of an inconvenience, the truth was about to descend on them like a storm they could never have predicted. Because humiliation was only the beginning. The reckoning was next. The glass door was only a few steps away. The staff thought they had won. The teller leaned back in her chair, smirking, while the manager straightened his tie with smug satisfaction. In their minds, the stranger had been dismissed, silenced, and put in his place. But they didn't notice the subtle pause in his stride. They didn't notice the way his eyes flicked toward the wall clock one last time. The second hand swept forward with precision. 7 minutes had passed since he first walked in. Exactly 7. The CEO stopped. Slowly, deliberately, he turned back toward the counter. His calmness was unsettling, almost eerie in contrast to the storm brewing inside him. "Before I go," he said, his voice steady but laced with quiet power, "let me ask you one last time." The teller glanced at her manager, then laughed. "Oh, he's still here." The CEO took a single step closer. His presence seemed larger now, commanding more space, more attention. "You're certain," he asked, "that you're refusing me service?" The manager exhaled, visibly irritated. "Sir, we've been clear. You are not qualified for what you're asking. This branch does not have time for fantasies." The teller added cruelly, "Yeah, we told you already. You're wasting our time." Gasps whispered through the lobby. A few customers leaned forward in their seats, sensing that this wasn't just another argument, it was the prelude to something bigger. The CEO's eyes scanned the room. He saw every face, the pity, the discomfort, the shame. Then his gaze returned to the staff, steady and unflinching. He nodded once, as though sealing a private decision. "All right," he said softly, "then you've made your choice." The teller smirked. Finally, he gets it. But there was something in his tone that unsettled even the smug manager. A weight in his words that carried more than resignation, it carried inevitability. The CEO slipped his hand into his pocket, pulling out his sleek watch. He checked it, tilting it slightly in the light. Then he whispered, almost to himself but loud enough for all to hear, 7 minutes. The manager frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" The CEO slipped the watch back onto his wrist, his expression unreadable. "It means," he said calmly, "I gave you 7 minutes to show who you really are, and you did." The teller shifted uncomfortably for the first time, her smirk faltering. What are you talking about?" The CEO didn't answer her. Instead, he reached into his other pocket and slowly pulled out a sleek leather case. With deliberate care, he set it down on the counter. The staff exchanged confused glances. Customers leaned in, curiosity growing. He opened it, revealing a stack of official documents neatly arranged inside. At the very top, his corporate identification papers, signed and sealed. The manager squinted, trying to dismiss it. "What is this? Some paperwork you printed at home?" The CEO raised his eyes, meeting the manager's with a stare so steady it froze the man midst. Then, calmly, he laid the final document on the counter, his official credentials as the chief executive officer of one of the largest companies in the state. The lobby erupted in whispers. Customers craned their necks, some gasping as they recognized the name. A few even muttered it aloud. It was a name that had been in headlines, a company that had transformed entire industries. The teller's smirk vanished. Her face drained of color. The CEO leaned forward slightly, his voice low but cutting through the silence like a blade. I wasn't here today as a CEO. I wasn't here with my title, or my wealth, or my influence. I came here as an ordinary man, to see how your branch treats ordinary people. And now, he paused, letting the silence thicken. Now I have my answer. The room was electric. Some customers nodded in silent approval. Others stared in awe at the man they had just seen dismissed, like a nobody. The manager swallowed hard, trying to recover. Sir, I didn't realize, but the CEO raised his hand, stopping him cold. Don't explain. Don't excuse. You had 7 minutes to decide who you are, and you chose. The teller's voice cracked. Wait, we didn't mean. The CEO shook his head slowly. You meant every word, and the world will see it for what it is. The lobby went dead silent. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. The shift in power was undeniable. The man they had mocked now stood revealed as the one who held their future in his hands. And yet, he wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. His calmness was more terrifying than rage could ever be. The CEO gathered his documents, slipping them back into the leather case. He turned once more to the clock on the wall, then back to the staff. His final words carried the weight of certainty. Your time is up. With that, he turned and began walking toward the office doors in the back, not toward the exit. The staff froze in confusion. The customers whispered in disbelief. Where was he going? None of them knew. None of them understood. Not yet, but in just a few moments, the phone call he was about to make would change the fate of the entire branch forever. The leather case clicked shut with precision, but its echo felt like a thunderclap across the silent lobby. Every eye was locked on him now. The man who had just declared their time was up. The calmness in his stride unsettled everyone, because calmness meant control, and control meant power. He stopped near the center of the lobby, resting the case gently on a desk. His voice, when it came, carried not the bitterness of revenge but the clarity of truth. You assumed I was a nobody. You assumed I didn't belong here. And you assumed you had the right to refuse me. He opened the case again, this time pulling out a slim folder of papers. With deliberate movements, he placed the first document on the counter. This, he said, sliding it toward the manager, is my identification. The manager leaned forward, his fingers trembling as he lifted the card. The color drained from his face. The name embossed in silver letters matched the headlines plastered across financial magazines, business journals, and news outlets for years. A name that commanded respect in every boardroom. Whispers erupted in the crowd. Customers gasped as recognition spread like fire. That's him. One whispered, I've seen him on TV. Another murmured, isn't he worth billions? The CEO didn't flinch. He placed another document on the counter, corporate ownership papers, with his signature and seal. In this, he continued, proves my position as chief executive officer of one of the most influential companies in the nation. The teller's smirk had vanished entirely, her lips trembling. She looked from the paper to the man she had mocked, as if the ground beneath her was crumbling. But the moment that shattered the entire branch came next. The CEO withdrew one final document, heavier than the rest, stamped and certified. He set it down with quiet finality. In this, he said, his tone sharp as glass, proves I am also your bank's largest private investor. The very foundation of this chain exists, in part, because of me. The lobby exploded in gasps. A woman clutched her purse tighter, her mouth wide open. A young man in line muttered, oh my God. The manager staggered back as though the words themselves had struck him. His voice cracked. You're our investor. The CEO's gaze was unshakable. Not just an investor, the largest, which means, he leaned forward, this branch belongs to me. Silence, utter silence, the kind that stretches, suffocates, and drowns. The staff exchanged frantic glances. The teller stuttered, trying to recover as, we didn't know, but the CEO cut her off with a raised hand. You didn't need to know. That's the point. You treated me based on your assumptions, not facts. On your prejudice, not policy. And now, he paused, scanning the room of pale faces. The consequences are yours. The customers leaned forward, their eyes wide, caught in the drama unfolding before them. Some even lifted their phones discreetly, recording what would surely go viral. The manager swallowed hard. Please, Mr. Williams, we can explain. This was a misunderstanding. The CEO's calm gaze cut through him like ice. Misunderstanding. His voice rose, not in volume, but in weight. When you laughed in my face, when you dismissed me without a second glance, when you decided that my appearance told you everything you needed to know. The manager faltered. I didn't mean you meant every word. The CEO snapped, for the first time allowing steel into his tone. And today, you've revealed to everyone here exactly who you are. The truth always finds its way out. The teller's hands shook as she clutched the counter for balance. Please, sir, we'll do better, I promise. He turned toward her, and his calm returned, which somehow made his words sharper than anger. I didn't come here for promises. I came here to see the truth. And now, it's revealed. The room buzzed with whispers again. Customers nodded in silent agreement. Some shot disgusted glances at the staff, as if seeing them with new eyes. The CEO lifted the documents and slipped them back into his case. Each movement deliberate. Final. Your branch failed today. Not your systems. Not your policies. You, the staff, looked cornered, like prey surrounded by a predator who didn't even need to bare his teeth. But then, to everyone's shock, the CEO stepped back. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. Instead, he smiled faintly, and that smile carried more power than fury ever could. He turned toward the customers. I want you all to remember something, he said, his voice steady and commanding. Respect costs nothing, but disrespect can cost you everything. A wave of murmurs swept through the lobby. Customers nodded. Some clapped softly, while others shook their heads in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. The manager tried one last desperate attempt. Sir, please, if you'll allow us, we can fix this. The CEO closed his case and straightened. No, he said quietly. This can't be fixed. It can only be faced. He glanced once more at the wall clock. 8 minutes had passed now since he first walked in, and in those 8 minutes, an entire branch had sealed its fate. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the glass office in the back. The staff stared in horror, realizing exactly what came next. The call, the authority, the judgment they could no longer escape. The customers parted like waves, making way for him as he strode forward. His calmness wasn't just unsettling anymore, it was terrifying. Because calmness meant certainty. Certainty meant decision. And decision meant the end. He reached for the office door, pausing just before stepping inside. His final words to the staff echoed like a sentence passed down in a courtroom. The truth has been revealed. And now, consequences will follow. The door closed behind him with a soft click, but the sound rang louder than thunder in the ears of everyone left standing in that silent, suffocating lobby. The glass office door closed with a soft click, but outside it sounded like a thunderbolt. Every customer, every teller, every staff member froze, their hearts pounding in the silence. They knew something was about to happen, something final. Inside the office, the CEO set his leather case on the desk and calmly pulled out his phone. His face was unreadable, his movements slow, deliberate. He scrolled, found the number he wanted, and pressed call. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't hide. He pressed the speaker button, placing the phone on the desk so every sound would carry into the stunned lobby. Hello, a crisp voice answered. This is Michael Williams, the CEO said, his voice even and clear. Patch me through to the regional director immediately. The room outside stiffened. His name alone was enough to confirm everything. This wasn't a bluff. This wasn't an exaggeration. This was real. A moment later, a deeper voice came on the line, laced with urgency. Mr. Williams, sir, what an honor. What can I do for you today? The CEO leaned back in the chair. His eyes never left the trembling faces beyond the glass wall. I'm at one of your branches right now. I came in, quietly, to open an account. Instead of being welcomed, I was humiliated, laughed at, dismissed. Your staff made it clear I didn't belong. The regional director inhaled sharply. That's unthinkable, sir. Which branch? The CEO spoke the address with precision. The name of the city, the street, the branch number. And with each word, the employees outside sank lower in their seats, their stomachs twisting. The director didn't hesitate. His voice hardened. Sir, I'll handle this immediately. That staff does not represent our institution, nor our values. They will not remain in their positions another hour. Gasps rippled through the lobby. The teller, who had mocked him, grabbed the counter, her knuckles white. The manager staggered back, whispering, No, this can't be happening. The CEO's voice cut through. But final. Put it on record. I want them terminated today. Effective immediately. Their arrogance cost them their careers. Let it be an example. The director's tone sharpened further. Understood, Mr. Williams. As of this moment, every staff member in that branch is relieved of duty. Security will arrive to escort them out. We'll bring in replacements by morning. The words landed like a gavel. Striking. Final, irrevocable. The phone line stayed open, every syllable echoing across the silent bank floor. The staff's faces twisted in shock. Some broke down, whispering desperate prayers. Others tried to plead. The teller stammered, Sir, please, I have children. I didn't mean it. The manager, red-faced and shaken, stepped forward, pressing his hand to the glass. Mr. Williams, please, give us one more chance. We were wrong, horribly wrong. We'll make it right. But the CEO didn't look at him. He simply picked up the phone and ended the call. Silence returned, heavier than before. The kind of silence that suffocates, and then, a sob broke through. One of the junior clerks buried her face in her hands. Another clutched his chair, whispering, We're finished. The customers who had witnessed the humiliation earlier now exchanged glances. Some shook their heads, others muttered, They deserved this. One man whispered poetic justice. The CEO finally stood, his voice carrying into the room like a verdict. 7 minutes ago, you thought you had power over me. Today, you've learned the truth. Power doesn't lie in uniforms, in counters, or in empty arrogance. It lies in respect, and you chose to throw yours away. The staff didn't move. They couldn't. Their entire world had collapsed in a single phone call. Then, from the back of the lobby, a young woman customer spoke softly, almost to herself but loud enough for all to hear. And now, they've lost everything. The CEO turned toward the glass door, opened it slowly, and stepped back into the lobby. His footsteps echoed on the tiled floor. No one dared breathe. His eyes swept across the staff, faces pale, lips trembling, eyes wet with regret. He let the silence hang before speaking again. You treated me like a stranger who didn't belong. Now you are the strangers in this place. As of today, this branch no longer has a staff. The words cut deeper than anger ever could. The teller collapsed into a chair, whispering, "Please, no, not like this." The manager lowered his head, unable to meet his gaze. But the CEO didn't stop. He walked past them, heading toward the exit, while customers stepped aside with a mix of awe and respect. Every step was measured, controlled. Behind him, the staff wept, begged, and pleaded. But he never turned back. Because some endings don't need fire, they just need silence. And in that silence, every one of them realized they had written their own fate. As the glass doors slid open, sunlight poured in, framing the CEO as he stepped outside. The lobby remained behind him, heavy with shame, drowning in the weight of consequences they could no longer escape. The story wasn't over, though not yet, for the CEO knew that beyond punishment lay something even greater, the chance to teach, to rebuild, and to redefine what respect truly means. The air inside the bank was still heavy with disbelief. Staff slumped in silence, their futures shattered, while customers stood frozen in place, watching the man they had just seen humiliated now walk back toward the center of the lobby. The CEO paused. His eyes swept across the room, not with anger anymore, but with something deeper, resolve. He cleared his throat, and the sound echoed through the quiet building. "Everyone here witnessed what happened," he began, his voice calm but carrying weight. "You saw how I was treated, not because of who I am, but because of what I looked like, because of assumptions." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Heads lowered, some in shame, some in thought. The CEO continued, "And that right there is the danger of prejudice. When you look at someone and think you already know their worth, when you decide they don't belong without ever asking who they are." He let the words sink in. The silence that followed was not the same as before. It wasn't filled with arrogance or fear. It was filled with reflection. A man in the crowd, an older customer, spoke softly. I saw it too. I saw how they treated you, and I said nothing. That makes me guilty too." The CEO turned toward him, his expression softening. "No," he said firmly, "you're not guilty. You're human. And sometimes, humans forget that silence can be just as loud as words. What matters is whether you learn from it." The man nodded, his eyes wet, while others shifted uncomfortably. Realizing the truth in those words, the CEO stepped closer to the counter, resting his hand on it. Respect isn't earned by a suit, or a title, or a bank balance. Respect is given because every person deserves it, from the janitor who cleans these floors, to the executive who signs million-dollar deals. The moment you forget that, you've already lost. A young woman customer, holding her child close, whispered, "So many people needed to hear this today." The CEO smiled faintly, his eyes flicking to her and the child. "Yes, because the lesson isn't just for the staff. It's for all of us. How many times have we judged a person too quickly, dismissed them, walked past someone who looked different, without realizing they might carry more strength, more wisdom, more power than we could ever imagine?" The crowd was silent, some nodding slowly, others looking away, burdened by their own memories. He straightened, his voice steady and resonant. "I walked in here dressed like any other man, and I was denied, insulted, told I didn't belong. But in truth, I belong anywhere I choose to stand. And so do you. So does every single one of you. Never let anyone tell you otherwise." The manager, now stripped of authority, whispered through trembling lips, "I wish I'd known who you were." The CEO turned sharply, his tone cutting but not cruel. "That's the problem. You shouldn't have needed to know who I was to treat me with dignity. You should have done it because it's the right thing. Because respect isn't about who someone is in the world. It's about who you are as a human being." Those words hit harder than any punishment. The staff lowered their heads, some fighting tears, knowing it was too late to change what they had done. The CEO let the silence hang again before speaking softly, almost like a teacher closing a lesson. "True power doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't need a badge, or a title, or a corner office. True power hides in plain sight, and it belongs to anyone who chooses integrity over arrogance, humility over pride, and respect over prejudice." The room seemed to shift. Customers exchanged glances, many with newfound understanding. A few even clapped quietly, though the CEO raised a hand, signaling he didn't want applause. "This isn't about me," he said. "This is about you, about us." About remembering that the next time you stand at a counter, or meet someone in the street, or sit next to a stranger, you don't judge them by the clothes they wear, or the color of their skin, or the size of their wallet. You treat them with dignity, because that dignity might just change a life, maybe even your own. His words hung in the air like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Customers nodded, some visibly moved. Even the children present seemed to sense the weight of what was being said. The CEO gave one final glance around the lobby. Remember this moment, not because of the punishment that was delivered, but because of the lesson it carries. Respect is free to give, and yet, it is priceless when received. With that, he stepped back, his posture tall, his presence commanding, but his voice gentle as he added, "And if you carry that lesson forward, then today, none of this was wasted." He turned toward the doors, leaving the stunned crowd in thoughtful silence. Behind him, the atmosphere was no longer filled with arrogance or shame, but with reflection. The customers had come to the bank for simple transactions, but they were leaving with something far greater, a story that would echo in their hearts, and a lesson that would ripple far beyond these walls. And as the CEO pushed open the glass doors, stepping once again into the bright afternoon sun, one truth remained clear. His next step wasn't just about shutting down a branch, it was about opening eyes. The glass doors of the bank swung open with a slow, deliberate push. Sunlight spilled in, washing over the marble floor as the CEO stepped outside. His stride was calm, unhurried, yet every movement carried an undeniable gravity. Behind him, silence clung to the lobby like a lingering shadow. The staff he had dismissed sat in stunned disbelief, and the customers left inside whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. But outside, the world continued as if nothing had happened. Cars passed by. A street vendor called out his prices. A child tugged on her mother's hand. Life moved forward, unaware that inside that bank, lives had been changed forever. The CEO adjusted his cufflinks, exhaled, and looked up at the sky. The storm that had raged inside him minutes ago was gone. What remained was dignity, quiet, unshakable dignity. A soft narrator's tone rises here, carrying the weight of the lesson forward. Moments of power are not always found in boardrooms or offices. Sometimes, they unfold in the smallest places, a lobby, a counter, a single interaction. And in those moments, the way we treat others speaks louder than any title ever could. The camera of imagination lingers on the CEO as he walks slowly down the steps, each footstep echoing like a drumbeat. He does not look back. He doesn't need to. What needed to be done was already finished. Customers inside pressed closer to the windows, watching him leave. Some felt shame, others felt awe, but all of them knew one thing. They would never forget this day. A woman's voice, trembling with reflection, whispered to her neighbor, "I'll never look at people the same way again." The narrator continues, calm yet firm, because here's the truth. The way you treat people when you believe they have nothing to give you reveals exactly who you are. The scene shifts in tone. The city around the CEO seems brighter, as if his composure itself changes the air. People he passes glance at him, sensing his presence but not knowing his story. He is just another man in their eyes, and yet, he is more. He stops briefly at the sidewalk. A young boy selling bottled water hesitates, unsure whether to approach. The CEO kneels, buys a bottle, and looks the boy in the eye. "You're doing good work," he says gently. "Keep going. Don't let anyone make you feel small." The boy beams, clutching the money tightly. It is a small exchange, but to the child, it means the world. The narrator's voice deepens. Respect costs nothing, and yet, it has the power to transform lives. One word, one gesture, one act of kindness can carry more value than any fortune. The CEO takes a sip of the water and continues down the street. His pace is steady, almost meditative. Behind him, the bank building looms like a monument, a place where arrogance had been stripped away and humility had been forced to rise. Inside, the dismissed staff members sit with their regrets. Some cry quietly, others stare blankly, realizing the weight of their choices. For them, the lesson came too late, but for the customers who watched, the moment planted a seed of awareness, of change, and as they left the bank one by one, they carried that seed into the world outside. The narrator whispers, almost like a reminder to the audience itself, never judge a book by its cover. Never assume the worth of a person by the clothes on their back, the color of their skin, or the balance of their account. Because true power, true greatness, often hides in plain sight. The camera of imagination widens. The CEO disappears into the crowd, blending in with hundreds of others. He is no longer just the man who owns companies or the man who closed down a bank branch. He is something more universal, a symbol of dignity, of patience, of justice carried with grace. The music swells softly, carrying the story to its close. Every choice we make and how we treat others writes the story of who we are. And in the end, that story, not our job, not our wealth, not our status, is what defines us. The final image lingers. The CEO's figure, moving steadily through the city, faceless in the crowd, yet unforgettable to all who witnessed his strength. And then, the voice delivers the closing line with quiet certainty. Remember this: the way you treat people when you think they are nothing reveals who you truly are. When you believe you are everything, fade to black.